Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The air tasted like burning metal and cooked flesh. Tiana's lungs ached with every breath she dragged through the smoke-choked command post, her silver braid whipping across her face as another explosion shook the walls. Dust rained from the ceiling in gray sheets. Through the jagged breach in the eastern wall, the sky burned orange and red, lit by artillery fire that walked closer with every passing second. "Commander!" The scout's voice cracked as he stumbled through the entrance. Armor scorched black across his chest plate. Blood ran from his nose. "They've breached the eastern perimeter. 12 units down, maybe more." "I know." Tiana didn't look up from the tactical map, her blue fingers tracing the crimson markers that clustered like infection around their position. Each marker represented 500 enemy combatants. They were drowning in red. "Pull back to secondary positions. Funnel them toward the generator choke point." "Commander, they're not funneling. They're everywhere." The building shook again. Chunks of reinforced stone crashed down 3 meters to her left, and she felt the impact through her boots. The map flickered, power fluctuating. "Then hold the line anyway." Her voice came out flat, commander cold, even as her jaw clenched hard enough to make her teeth ache. "Protect the shield generator. If it falls, we all die. Make them pay for every meter." The scout hesitated, his young face twisted with something between fear and the desperate need to survive. Then he nodded once and ran back into the chaos outside, where the screaming never stopped. Tiana's hand found the fresh cut on her cheek, fingers coming away red. She didn't remember taking the hit. Didn't matter. The generator was all that mattered now. That and the 7,000 souls sheltering behind its protective dome. Her people, her responsibility, her burden. The tactical display showed their defenses collapsing like wet paper. 3 more markers blinked out. Gone. Dead. "Tiana!" She spun at the voice, hand dropping to her energy blade. But it was only Gabe stumbling through the smoke in that filthy gray jumpsuit he never seemed to wash. Oil stains covered his hands up to the elbows. His hair stuck up in wild angles, and his eyes were too wide, too human in their naked fear. Human. The only one left on this continent, maybe the planet. His transport had crashed 4 months ago, scattering cargo and crew across 50 kilometers of hostile terrain. Everyone else dead, just him, the fragile maintenance tech, somehow still breathing. "The generator won't hold." He had to shout over the roar of engines and weapons fire that never ceased, never gave them a moment's peace. His accent made the words harsh, alien. "One more direct hit and the shield collapses. The power couplings are already failing. I've rerouted everything I can, but the thermal load is..." "Then make it hold longer." "I can't. The structural integrity is..." The world went quiet, not silent, not peaceful, just wrong. The battle sounds dimmed as if someone had stuffed cotton in her ears, muffled and distant, and Tiana's warrior instinct screamed at her to move. Move now, but her body hadn't caught up yet. Through the breach in the wall, something massive blotted out the burning sky. The mech stood 6 meters tall, black armor absorbing light like a wound in reality. Its optical sensors glowed blood red, twin points of malice that swept across the command post with predatory precision. The plasma cannon mounted on its right arm, designed to crack bunkers and burn through reinforced positions, rotated with mechanical certainty toward the shield generator, toward her, toward everything they were trying to protect. "Tiana, get down!" Gabe's voice. Not screaming, commanding. She saw his face, and time seemed to slow down, crystallize into a single frozen moment. His gray eyes weren't wide with terror. They were cold, focused, utterly calm. The expression of a man who'd already made his choice, calculated the odds, accepted the outcome. This wasn't panic. This was mathematics. This was certainty. He didn't run away. He ran toward her with the precision of someone executing a plan. His hands closed on the blast-torn armored door that had been blown off its hinges hours ago, a half-ton slab of reinforced metal that 3 of her warriors together might have struggled to lift. His muscles bulged under his jumpsuit, tendons standing out like cables in his neck, and he dragged it, feet skidding on the stone floor, hauling it up between her and the mech's cannon, between her and death. "No!" The word caught in her throat. His eyes met hers one last time. Gray. Human gray. Not afraid. Not even sad. Just resolved. He'd done the math. This was the only equation that worked. The plasma cannon fired. The world exploded into light and heat and a sound that wasn't a sound, but a physical force that picked Tiana up and hurled her like a child's toy. Her back hit the wall and all the air punched out of her lungs. Her vision went white, then red, then dark around the edges, ringing, screaming, her own screaming. When she could see again, seconds, minutes, she didn't know. The door was gone, just slag and dripping metal cooling in the superheated air. And Gabe, nothing, scattered fragments. Ash. The shield generator hummed quietly behind its scorched housing. Damaged but intact. Functional. It would hold. It would keep her people alive. The mech's sensors swept the room once more, targeting solutions recalculating. Then it pivoted with mechanical efficiency and stalked back toward the breach, seeking new objectives now that its primary target remained protected. Tiana tried to stand and couldn't. Her legs wouldn't work. She dragged herself forward on her elbows, armor scraping stone, toward the place where Gabe had been standing, where he'd planted his feet and refused to run because some instinct told him to be a shield for someone he barely knew. For her. No! Her voice came out broken. No, you stupid! Why did you? But there was no answer. There would never be an answer. Just the smell of burned metal and the quiet hum of the generator he'd died protecting. Her hand closed on something small and warm. She lifted it, blinking through tears she didn't remember starting to cry. A backup power cell, still glowing, not white or yellow like their standard technology, but a soft, pulsing blue. Wrong color. Human color. She stared at it, transfixed by the alien rhythm of its light. Pulse. Pause. Pulse. Like a heartbeat that refused to stop even when the body was gone. She turned it over in her palm, tucked into a small compartment in her chest plate that she hadn't known existed. When had he? Memory hit her like a second blast wave. Just in case. Gabe's voice 3 weeks ago, as he'd worked on her armor with those clever, oil-stained hands. Always good to have a backup system. I'm modifying this compartment to house an emergency power cell, completely independent from your main grid. She looked at him with undisguised contempt. Our armor is perfect. We don't need human paranoia. His smile had been small, sad, knowing. Nothing is perfect, Commander. Not your armor, not my tech, not me. He tapped the compartment gently. But maybe together we can be good enough to survive. She dismissed him, walked away while he was still talking. Because he was weak, because he was human, because his kind was ending and hers was ascending. He was a hero. The words scraped out of her throat like broken glass. Outside, the battle raged on. Her people were fighting, dying, winning maybe if the generator held, if his sacrifice meant something. But all she could see were his eyes in that last moment. All she could feel was the weight of the power cell in her palm. His gift, his backup plan, his way of protecting her even when she'd never asked for it. The stone was cold beneath her. The generator hummed. And Gabe was gone. 2 days later, the square in front of the ruined command post had transformed into something obscene. Warriors who'd barely slept since the battle ended now stood in formation around a hastily erected cairn. Rough stones piled high, crowned with a twisted chunk of the mech's black armor that someone had salvaged from the wreckage. Gabe's grave. Except there was no body. Just symbolism. Just lies. Tiana stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed over her chest, face an impenetrable mask. The fresh cut on her cheek had scabbed over. She hadn't bothered to heal it properly. Wanted the reminder. The backup power cell sat heavy in her pocket, its blue pulse a secret warmth against her thigh. Elder Kale's voice carried across the square, amplified but mercifully brief. The human sacrifice proves our strength. His weathered face was triumphant. Even the weakest will die for us. The era of mankind ends. Our era begins. The crowd erupted, fists raised. A chant began. The era dawns. The era dawns. Tiana watched their faces, saw belief, saw pride, saw warriors who actually thought a man's death proved their superiority rather than his courage. Young faces, old faces, all of them buying the lie wholesale. A young warrior, barely past his first season, approached the cairn with reverence, placing a plasma rifle at its base like an offering to a god who'd proven himself unworthy of worship. Others followed, weapons, armor pieces, tokens of a victory purchased with human blood and repackaged as proof of alien supremacy. Her jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. A flash of memory, unbidden, visceral. Gabe's smile 3 weeks ago, when he'd handed her a cup of that terrible human coffee he somehow kept making despite their supply situation. "Try it," he'd said. "It's awful, but it's our awful." That small, knowing smile that said he understood he was an outsider and didn't care, would keep being himself anyway, would keep offering his terrible coffee and his brilliant solutions and his human warmth until... She blinked. The memory vanished. The square came back into focus. Elder Kale materialized at her elbow, his expression smug satisfaction barely contained. "Beautiful, isn't it? A perfect symbol. The human's weakness made manifest in his heroic end. It will inspire our warriors for generations." He wasn't weak. The words came out harder than she'd intended. Kale's eyebrow raised slightly. "Commander?" Tiana's hand found the backup power cell in her pocket, thumb rubbing across its smooth surface. She'd been carrying it constantly since the battle. He held a door, half a ton of reinforced metal, held it long enough to shield the generator. "To shield me." She finally looked at the elder, let him see the anger in her eyes. None of our warriors would have tried. They would have calculated the odds and retreated to secondary positions. Strategically sound, he was a hero. The word tasted bitter and true. And we're turning his death into propaganda about our superiority. That's not honor. That's cowardice. Kale's expression hardened. "Careful, Commander. The people need this. They need to believe the sacrifice meant something, that his weakness became our strength. Would you take that from them? His sacrifice meant he saved 7,000 lives while we celebrated how fragile humans are." Tiana's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "I won't let his death become a tool for your political speeches." "He was human," Kyle said flatly, dismissing her with those 3 words. "And now he is gone. Celebrate, child. We have won." He walked away back toward the cheering crowd, leaving Tiana alone with her thoughts and the weight of the power cell in her pocket. She looked at her hands. Blue skin, warrior's calluses, commander's responsibility. These hands had failed to save him. Worse, they'd pushed him away, dismissed his concerns, treated him like a burden instead of the brilliant, brave, stupid man he'd been. The debt sat in her chest like a stone. Unpayable. Permanent. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the cairn, to the ghost, to the memory. "I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I didn't see you." The celebration continued around her, the dance of the victors on the dead man's grave. She would not forget. She would not let them reduce him to a symbol. She would... Her communicator chirped. Once, twice, emergency frequency. Tiana's blood went cold. The command center looked better than it had 2 days ago. Walls patched, equipment restored. The hole in the eastern wall sealed with emergency plating. But the repairs were superficial. Tiana could still see the scorch marks where Gabe had died, still smell the burned metal when the ventilation cycled wrong. She'd been staring at tactical reports for 3 hours, trying to understand how the enemy had known their defensive positions so precisely, their weak points, the exact timing of patrol rotations, everything. Someone had fed them intelligence, or their technology was better than anyone had believed. Neither option gave her comfort. "Commander!" The sentry burst through the door without knocking, face pale. Sensors just lit up. 3 signatures incoming. Fast. The tactical display sprang to life. 3 red dots moving with purpose, not the random patrol pattern of scouts, heading directly toward the command center, toward her. "They're back," she breathed. Sirens wailed. Warriors scrambled to positions, but Tiana stood frozen, watching the dots converge, calculating distances and angles, and realizing the horrible truth. "They're coming for me." It made sense. Brutal, efficient sense. Cut off the head, destroy the command structure. The enemy had studied them, learned their patterns, and now they were moving with surgical precision. All units to defensive positions. Her voice cut through the chaos. Seal the lower levels. Get the civilians to the deep shelters. What about you, Commander? I'll hold here. She drew her energy blade, the weapon humming to life in her grip. Someone has to buy you time to evacuate. Commander, you can't go. They went. She heard their footsteps fading, heard the blast doors sealing, heard the command center fall silent, except for the approaching thrum of mechanical footsteps that shook the building's bones. 3 of her best warriors stayed. Veterans. They didn't need to be ordered. They simply took positions flanking the main entrance. Weapons ready, faces set in the grim acceptance of those who knew they were about to die. The wall exploded inward, not the door. The wall. The mechs tore through reinforced stone like it was paper, their black forms emerging from clouds of dust and debris. Red optical sensors swept the room, locked onto targets, calculated trajectories. The first warrior fired. Plasma bolts splashed harmlessly off armored plating. The mech's return fire cut him in half. The second warrior lasted longer, managed to dodge, roll, come up firing from a new angle. The mech's arm moved almost casually, and the warrior's head separated from his shoulders. The third warrior screamed and charged. Blade raised. Brave. Stupid. Dead before he crossed half the distance. Tiana stood alone. 3 mechs surrounded her in a loose triangle, their bulk making the command center feel small and inadequate. Their sensors focused on her with mechanical precision. Red light painted her blue skin pink. She raised her blade. Her hands didn't shake. That was something. That was all she had left. Not shaking when death came for her with metal hands and cold efficiency. Come on, then. Her voice came out steady. Let's see which of us is really superior. The mechs didn't attack. They stood there silent, waiting, sensors focused on her. Red light painting her blue skin pink. Then one moved, not toward her, but past her, toward the wall behind the tactical display. No, she started. The mech's manipulator arm extended with deliberate precision. It grasped the banner hanging there, her clan standard, 300 years old, woven by her grandmother's grandmother, the symbol of her bloodline and her right to command, the fabric that proved she was more than just another warrior. The mech tore it down, and methodically, with what felt like conscious malice, began to shred it. Ancient fibers parted, colors bled. History dissolved into strips of worthless cloth that drifted to the floor like dead leaves. Tiana's world narrowed to that single point of destruction. They weren't just here to kill her. They were here to erase her, to make sure nothing of her legacy remained, to reduce her to ash and forgotten memory. Come on, then. Her voice came out steady even as her hands shook with rage. Let's see which of us is really superior. The mechs didn't attack. They stood there silent, waiting. One of them raised its manipulator arm, not the one with weapons, but the one designed for grappling, for seizing and holding. They weren't going to kill her. They were going to take her. Understanding crashed over her like ice water. Alive. They wanted her alive. For interrogation. For leverage. For public execution broadcast across every world they'd conquered, to show what happened to those who resisted. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to make them kill her clean and quick. But her body wouldn't move, paralyzed not by fear but by the sheer weight of failure. She'd failed her warriors, failed Gabe, failed the bloodline whose banner now lay in shreds at the enemy's feet. The blade in her hand felt heavy, so heavy, she could turn it, press it to her own throat, end this on her terms, deny them their prize. It would be easy, quick, the warrior's way out. Her hand moved, beginning to turn the blade inward. In the square outside, the celebration continued. The villagers danced around Gabe's cairn, stomping their feet in ritual patterns, singing songs of victory and the end of mankind. They didn't know the mechs had returned, didn't know their commander was about to die or be taken, didn't know their salvation was draining away like water through cupped hands. The dance of the victors, the dance on a dead man's grave. In the command center, Tiana's blade moved closer to her throat. The mechs watched, sensors tracking but not interfering. Let the enemy commander kill herself. It made their job easier. The cold metal touched her skin. And then, Laughter. Cold. Static-laced. Completely impossible. It echoed from every speaker in the command center. From the wall-mounted units, from the tactical display, from the emergency broadcast system. It crackled from the mech's own communication arrays. It hissed from the vocoder built into Tiana's helmet, right next to her ear. The mechs froze. Their sensors spun wildly, searching for the source of a sound that shouldn't exist. Red lights flickered to orange, then back to red. Targeting solutions collapsed and recalculated. Backup system. The voice was Gabe's, distorted by static and digital corruption, but unmistakably, impossibly his. Told you it would come in handy, Commander. Tiana's blade clattered to the floor. Gabe? The word came out broken, disbelieving. But you, I saw you. Yeah, I saw me too. Wasn't pretty. The voice crackled with interference. Turns out dying isn't as permanent as it used to be. Not if you're stupid enough to beta test experimental neural interface tech without proper oversight protocols. The mech's sensors locked onto her armor, onto her helmet, trying to pinpoint the source. Their weapons began to rotate toward her. I wouldn't do that. The defensive turrets that had been silent since the battle, destroyed, everyone thought, beyond repair, suddenly came alive. Barrels rotated with smooth precision. Targeting lasers painted red dots across black armor plating. The mechs had a split second to process the threat. The turrets fired. Not plasma. Not conventional rounds. Something else. Electromagnetic pulses that crackled blue-white across the command center, arcing between the mechs like lightning looking for ground. The black armor, designed to absorb and dissipate energy weapons, suddenly became a conductor. The mechs seized, servos locking, optical sensors going dark. One tried to raise its weapons. The turret to its right put 3 rounds through its shoulder joint, and the arm sparked and fell limp. Another attempted to retreat toward the breach in the wall. Force fields Tiana hadn't even known existed shimmered to life, blocking the exit with translucent barriers that hummed with power. The mech slammed into the field and bounced back, stumbling. Sealed, Gabe's voice said. They're not going anywhere. The third mech swiveled toward Tiana, damage assessment complete, deciding to complete its primary objective even in degraded combat status. It lunged forward, manipulator arm extending. A secondary turret, one mounted on the ceiling that Tiana had forgotten existed, dropped down on a mechanical arm and put a sustained burst directly into the mech's sensor cluster. The red lights went dark. The machine crashed forward and didn't move. The remaining 2 mechs fought with desperate efficiency, but they were outmatched. Whatever Gabe had become, he had access to systems Tiana didn't even remember were installed. Turrets fired from impossible angles. Force fields appeared and disappeared, herding the mechs into kill zones. The blast doors opened and closed in rapid sequence, disorienting the enemy's navigation systems. It took 47 seconds to reduce 2 combat mechs to smoking scrap metal. Then silence. Just the hum of cooling weapons and the crackle of small fires. Tiana stood frozen, blade forgotten on the floor, staring at the carnage. Her legs wanted to give out. Her mind couldn't process what had just happened. Tiana? Gabe's voice softer now, worried. Still with me? How? The word barely had sound behind it. Honestly? No idea. Best guess. The neural interface I was testing managed to copy my consciousness at the moment of cellular death. Took the blast from that plasma cannon, and my body got vaporized, but my mind uploaded. The backup power cell in your armor became an anchor point, and from there I could access the local network, bit by bit, system by system. Took me 2 days, but I mapped everything. You've been here the whole time. Tiana found her voice, found her anger. You've been conscious while they danced on my grave? Yeah, I noticed. The static made his voice hard to read, but she thought she caught bitterness underneath. Wasn't really in a position to object. Spent most of the time trying to figure out how to move electrons the right direction. Turns out being a ghost is complicated. You're not a ghost. She didn't have words for what he was. Digital, distributed, a consciousness running on your village's entire electrical infrastructure. A pause. Also possibly going insane, but we'll deal with that later. Right now we've got bigger problems. The tactical display sprang to life, showing data that made Tiana's blood freeze. Troop movements, enemy positions, attack vectors. They're not done, Gabe said. These three were just reconnaissance in force, testing our response time. The real attack comes in 6 hours, maybe less. How do you know this? I cracked their communication protocols while they were surrounding you. Uploaded a worm into their command network. I'm reading their tactical chatter right now. Static crackled. Tiana, they're sending everything. Full assault. They're going to level this place and everyone in it. She looked at the destroyed mechs, at the turrets still smoking from sustained fire, at the force fields humming quietly in the breached wall. Can we hold? Maybe, if we're smart, if we work together. His voice took on an edge. But I need something from you. What? Trust. I need you to trust me. Really trust me, not just accept my help because you're desperate. I'm running on borrowed electricity and sheer stubbornness here. If this is going to work, I need you to be my hands, my eyes, my partner. Tiana closed her eyes, felt the weight of leadership pressing down, the responsibility for 7,000 lives, the debt she owed to a dead man who wasn't quite dead anymore. Tell me what you need. First, stop them from tearing down my grave. It's weirdly personal now. Despite everything, the death, the fear, the impossible situation, Tiana laughed. It came out broken and half sobbing, but it was a laugh. Deal. What else? Get to the main reactor. I need you to manually override some safeties so I can push more power through the defensive grid. It's going to be technical. I'll walk you through it. I'm not a technician. No, you're better. You're someone who doesn't give up when things get complicated. Now move, Commander. We've got work to do. Tiana grabbed her blade from the floor, checked her armor seals, and ran toward the reactor level. Behind her, the turrets powered down, conserving ammunition. The force fields dimmed but stayed active, ready to spring back to full strength at a moment's notice. Gabe? Still here. Thank you for saving me, for coming back. A pause, static. Then, thank you for carrying me. That power cell, you could have thrown it away, could have forgotten about me, but you kept it close. That's why I could anchor to you. That's why I'm here at all. She ran faster, feeling the weight of the power cell in her pocket. The gift, the backup plan, the connection between living warrior and digital ghost. They had 6 hours, maybe less. It would have to be enough. The reactor chamber was a cathedral of humming machinery, 3 stories of cylindrical containment vessels wrapped in coolant pipes and monitoring systems. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh red. Tiana's boots rang on metal grating as she descended the central stairway. See the main control console? Southeast corner. Gabe's voice guided her through her helmet. There's a manual override panel. Should be behind a locked cover. Tiana found it, ripped the cover off with her bare hands. Inside, rows of switches and diagnostic readouts she didn't understand glowed softly in the red light. Okay, I need you to flip switches 4, 7, and 12 in sequence. That'll unlock the power limiter. What will that do? Let me pull more energy from the reactor to feed the defensive systems. Also might make the whole thing go critical if we're not careful, so maybe don't ask too many questions until we're done. Tiana flipped the switches. Something deep in the floor rumbled. The lights flickered. Good. Now I need you to input an authorization code. There's a keypad to your left. She found it. What's the code? Your birthday. Standard format. How do you know my birthday? I maintained your armor for 4 months, Commander. It's in the calibration logs. Also, you got drunk exactly once and told me about the time you stole a transport skiff when you were 16 and crashed it into the Elder's Garden. That was fun. Despite the situation, despite the fear and the countdown clock in her head, Tiana smiled. I was hoping you'd forgotten that. Digital memory, I couldn't forget if I wanted to, which is either a blessing or a curse, still deciding. She entered the code. The console beeped acceptance. More rumbling from below. Perfect. Now I need you to physically disconnect the emergency shutoff linkage. It's a red lever behind the main housing. You'll have to climb down to sublevel 3. That's near the primary coolant system. Yep, also going to be about 50 degrees hotter than comfortable. Sorry. Tiana was already moving, descending the stairs to where the heat hit her like a physical force. Sweat immediately soaked through her armor's underlayer. The air tasted like copper and ozone. She found the lever, wrapped both hands around it, and pulled. It didn't budge. Gabe, it's not moving. It's probably corroded. Hit it, hard. She drew her blade, activated it, and slammed the pommel against the lever's base. Once. Twice. On the third strike, something cracked and the lever suddenly gave, swinging free with a screech of protesting metal. The reactor's hum changed pitch, rising towards something that sounded distinctly unhealthy. That's normal, right? Tiana asked, climbing back up the stairs as fast as her overheated body would allow. Define normal. It's not exploding, which is the important part. Though you might want to clear out of there, I'm about to do something that's either brilliant or catastrophically stupid. Which one? I'll let you know when I figure it out. Tiana ran. Behind her, the reactor's pitch kept climbing, a sustained note that made her teeth ache. She hit the main level, burst through the doors, and kept running until she was in the corridor outside. The door sealed behind her. Through the small window, she watched the reactor chamber's lighting shift from red to blue to white. Energy arced between the containment vessels like living lightning. The floor shook. Gabe! Still here. It's stable. Mostly. I'm redistributing power across the grid, bringing offline systems back to full operational status. Turns out your village had a lot of defensive tech installed that nobody bothered to maintain. I'm fixing that. Also discovering that your previous technicians were idiots. No offense. None taken. What can we do now? Now, we wait for them to come, and we give them the fight of their lives. A pause. Tiana, there's something you need to know. I've been in their systems, seen their tactical data. They're not just hitting us. They're hitting everyone. Every settlement, every village, every defensive position across the continent. This is their endgame. They're trying to wipe your people out completely. The corridor suddenly felt colder despite the heat radiating from the reactor chamber. Why? Best I can tell, resources. Your territory has mineral deposits they need. You're in the way. Classic colonizer logic. Just move in, eliminate the inconvenient natives. Take what you want. We'll fight them. I know, but Tiana, they have numbers. Even with everything I can do, even with perfect tactics, we might not win this. She closed her eyes, felt the weight pressing down again. 7,000 lives. Children, elders, warriors who trusted her to lead them through this. Then we make them pay for it. Every meter, every life. We make it so expensive that even if they win, they'll remember what it cost. That's my girl. The static couldn't hide the warmth in his voice. Come on, let's go tell your people what's coming. The square had emptied. The celebration had ended when the sirens started, when the mechs had attacked. Now warriors stood at attention in formation, weapons ready, faces grim. The cairn, Gabe's grave, stood quiet in the center, abandoned by its dancers. Tiana walked through the crowd. They parted for her, their eyes tracking the scorch marks on her armor, the cuts and bruises that spoke of recent combat. She climbed onto a raised platform that had been set up for the elder's speeches. They're coming back, she said without preamble. Full assault, 6 hours or less. Everything they have. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Fear, anger, determination. We will hold. Her voice carried across the square, amplified by speakers that Gabe must have patched into. We will fight, and we will make them regret ever setting foot on our world. How? Someone shouted. We barely survived the last attack. Because we're not alone. Tiana pulled the backup power cell from her pocket, held it up for everyone to see. It glowed softly in her palm. The human died protecting us, but his spirit, his consciousness, lives on in our systems, in our defenses. He's been working these past 2 days, learning their tactics, infiltrating their networks, preparing for this moment. The human is dead, Elder Kale pushed forward through the crowd. We buried him. We honored his sacrifice. You honored a symbol, Tiana shot back. You danced on his grave and celebrated his weakness. But he was never weak. He was strong enough to save us. And he's strong enough to fight with us now. This is madness. This is survival. Tiana's voice dropped to something cold and absolute. And if you want to argue about it, Elder, you can do it from the deep shelters with the other non-combatants. Otherwise, shut up and prepare for battle. Kyle's face flushed darker blue, but he didn't argue further. He turned and stalked away, radiating offense. Tiana looked back at the assembled warriors. The last man is dead, she said, echoing the words from the elder's propaganda speech. But his spirit remains with us, and it thirsts for vengeance. She pointed to the sky, where distant contrails marked incoming ships. They're coming for us. Let's show them what it costs to dance on a dead man's grave. The warriors roared approval, weapons raised, ready for the fight, but Tiana felt a knot in her stomach pulling tighter. 6 hours, maybe less, and then everything would burn. Gabe, she whispered, sub-vocalizing so only her helmet pickup would catch it. Right here. Are we going to die? A long pause. Honestly, probably. But we're going to take a whole lot of them with us, and we're going to do it together. She smiled despite herself. Together. Always. Now get your people into position. I'm picking up preliminary scout signals. They're early. How early? 4 hours instead of 6. They know we hurt their mechs. They're not giving us time to prepare. Tiana started issuing orders, her mind shifting into combat mode. Warriors scattered to defensive positions. Civilians evacuated to the deep shelters. The entire village transformed into a fortress in minutes of controlled chaos. And through it all, Gabe's presence hummed in the background, lights flickering, systems coming online, defenses preparing. The ghost in the machine, watching over them all. 3 hours and 47 minutes later, the attack began. Tiana stood on the eastern wall, watching the horizon. The sunset painted everything red and gold, beautiful and terrible. And through that beauty, the enemy came. Mechs. Dozens of them. Marching in perfect formation, their footfalls synchronized into a drumbeat of war. Behind them, troop carriers disgorged hundreds of soldiers. Above them, gunships circled like predatory birds. Mother of Light, someone breathed beside her. Hold the line, Tiana said. Her voice didn't shake. That was something. Wait for my command. The enemy advanced. 500 meters. 400. 300. Gabe, you ready? All systems online. Power grid holding steady. Turrets loaded. Force fields at maximum. Let's dance, Commander. Fire! The village defenses opened up in a coordinated symphony of destruction. Turrets that had been hidden, camouflaged, forgotten. Now they sprang to life. Their targeting solutions calculated by a digital consciousness that could process faster than any organic brain. Plasma bolts streaked across the battlefield with surgical precision, finding weak points in armor, exploiting gaps in formations. The first wave of mechs went down like wheat before a scythe, but there were more. Always more. Eastern perimeter holding, a warrior shouted. Southern wall taking fire. Another voice strained. Redirect power to southern shields, Gabe said in her ear. Tell your warriors to fall back to secondary positions. I'll cover their retreat. Tiana relayed the orders, watched her warriors pull back in good order, while the turrets laid down suppressing fire that was almost too accurate to believe. Gabe was learning with each passing second, adapting to the enemy's tactics, predicting their movements before they made them. A gunship broke formation, diving toward the western wall where defenses were thinnest. Got it, Gabe said. A force field shimmered to life directly in the gunship's path. The craft hit it at full speed and crumpled like paper. It spun out of control and crashed into its own ground forces, exploding in a fireball that consumed a dozen soldiers. That's for burning my body, Gabe muttered. Stay focused. I am focused. I can be petty and focused simultaneously. Digital multitasking. An explosion rocked the eastern wall. Tiana stumbled, caught herself, looked down to see a section of the wall had been breached, enemy soldiers pouring through like water through a crack. Gabe, I see them, routing power to Section 7 turrets. But the turrets didn't fire. The enemy soldiers kept coming, spreading out, taking up firing positions inside the village perimeter. Gabe, the turrets are down. Something's wrong. They're not responding to commands. Tiana's blood went cold. They hacked you? No, wait. Static crackled. Oh no. What? They cut the physical power conduits. I've got control of the systems, but no electricity reaching them. Tiana, you need to get down there and manually restore power. There's a junction box in the maintenance tunnel below the eastern wall. I can't leave my position. If you don't, that entire section falls. They'll be in the village proper in 5 minutes. Go! She went, slid down the ladder from the wall, hit the ground running, warrior's instincts guiding her through chaos. Explosions, screaming, the clash of energy weapons and the heavy thump of projectile rounds punching through armor. An enemy soldier appeared in front of her, raising his weapon. She didn't slow down. Her blade took his head off in passing, and she kept running. The maintenance tunnel entrance was a heavy hatch set into the ground. She hauled it open, dropped into darkness lit only by failing emergency lights. Her boots splashed in standing water. The air tasted like mold and copper. Straight ahead, 50 meters. You'll see the junction box. It's big. Can't miss it. She ran, blade providing additional light, the blue glow reflecting off wet walls. Found the junction box. Found the sabotage. Someone had deliberately cut the cables, clean slices that spoke of careful planning. They had someone inside, she realized. Someone who knew our systems. Looks like it. Can you reconnect them? I'm a warrior, not a technician. And I'm a dead man running on electricity and spite. We work with what we have. The blue cable connects to the blue terminal. Red to red. Don't cross them or you'll electrocute yourself. Tiana's hands shook as she worked. Above, she could hear the battle raging. Explosions shook dust from the ceiling. How many of her warriors were dying while she played with wires? Blue to blue! She forced the connection. Sparks flew. Red to red! Another connection. More sparks. Done! That's it! Power's flowing again. Turrets coming back online. The sound of sustained gunfire echoed down through the tunnel. Heavy, mechanical, devastating. They're cut off, Gabe said with satisfaction. The soldiers who broke through are trapped in a crossfire. Not many of them left now. Tiana climbed back out of the tunnel, emerged into a scene of carnage. Bodies everywhere. Blue-skinned warriors. Enemy soldiers. The turrets swept the area methodically, cutting down anyone in enemy colors. She forced herself not to count the dead. Not yet. Later, if there was a later. Status? She demanded, running back toward the eastern wall. We're holding. Barely. They're throwing everything at us, but we're making them pay for every meter. Casualties are... He stopped. How bad? 30% and rising. 2,000 dead. 2,000 of her people. Gone in less than an hour of sustained combat. The number hit her like a physical blow. We can't keep this up, she said. I know, but we don't have a choice. It's hold or die. She reached the wall, climbed back up, took in the battlefield. The enemy had pulled back slightly, regrouping, but there were still so many of them. The ground was covered with destroyed mechs and dead soldiers, but for every one that fell, 3 more took their place. They're preparing for a final push, she said. They're going to hit us with everything at once. Then we'd better be ready. Tiana, I need you to do something. It's risky. Everything's risky. Tell me. I can overload the reactor, create a massive EMP burst. It'll fry every electronic system in a 5-kilometer radius, including the enemy's mechs, their communications, their targeting systems, everything. It'll also fry you. Silence. Just static. Gabe? Yeah, it'll kill me. For real this time. No backup, no upload. Just gone. Then we're not doing it. Tiana? No, we'll find another way. There is no other way. Look at them. We're outnumbered 5-1. In another hour, maybe less, they'll break through. They'll slaughter everyone. The deep shelters won't protect the civilians once the enemy controls the surface. This is the only option? She wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but she looked at the battlefield and saw the truth of his words. They were losing, slowly, inevitably losing. There has to be... A massive explosion cut her off. The western wall disappeared in a fireball. Through the smoke and flame, more mechs advanced. 12, 2 dozen. They just committed their reserves, Gabe said quietly. It's now or never. Tiana closed her eyes, felt tears on her cheeks. I just got you back. I know, and I'm sorry, but this is what I chose. This is what I'm choosing again. Let me save them, Tiana. Let me be the hero one more time. You've always been the hero. I was too stupid to see it. Hey, you're seeing it now. That's what matters. His voice softened. Besides, I'm not really alive, am I? I'm a ghost, a copy. Maybe it's time to let the ghost rest. Gabe, do it, please. Let me protect them. Let me protect you. Her hand found the backup power cell in her pocket. Still warm, still glowing. The anchor that kept him tethered to existence. How do I activate it? There's a manual override in the reactor control room. You'll need to input the emergency protocol code. He paused. It's the date I died, the first time. Of course it was. Go. I'll hold them as long as I can. Tiana ran. Again. Always running. Running from death. Running toward death. Running because that's what warriors did when the world was burning and there were no good options left. The command center was chaos. Wounded warriors. Medics working frantically. The smell of burned flesh and desperation. She didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Down the stairs, through the corridors, into the reactor chamber. The console waited, innocent and deadly. She pulled up the manual override screen, hands hovering over the keypad. The date he died. The day the world exploded in plasma fire and took the fragile human away from her forever. She entered it. The console beeped. A new screen appeared. Reactor overload sequence initiated. Confirm? Her finger hovered over the confirmation button. Tiana? Gabe's voice. Thank you for carrying me, for trusting me, for everything. Don't say goodbye. I have to, because this is goodbye. But it's okay. I'm not scared anymore. I know what I'm doing. I know what it's worth. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm terrified. That's okay too. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. It means you care. A pause. I'm going to push maximum power to the shields now. Give your people as much protection as I can. When you hit that button, tell everyone to get down. The EMP will hit hard. How long? 30 seconds after confirmation. That's all the time the reactor needs to build up critical charge. His voice crackled worse now. Interference building. Tiana, tell them I was happy to help. I'll tell them you were a hero, that you saved us, that you mattered. That's good. That's enough. She looked at the button, looked at the power cell in her other hand, glowing steady and warm. I'm sorry I didn't listen to you, she said. I'm sorry I dismissed you. I'm sorry I didn't see how brave you were until it was too late. You're seeing it now, and you're brave too. Brave enough to make the hard choice. Brave enough to... Static overwhelmed his words for a moment. Love you for that. What? But the interference was too bad. She couldn't hear him anymore. Just static and the distant thunder of battle, and her own heart pounding too fast in her chest. She pressed the button. Reactor overload confirmed. 30 seconds to critical EMP discharge. All units, she screamed into her communicator. Get down, now, 30 seconds, everyone down. She ran from the reactor chamber, taking the stairs 3 at a time, hit the command level, saw warriors dropping, covering their heads, civilians in the shelters being ordered to the lowest levels. 20 seconds. She reached the eastern wall, saw the enemy's final assault forming up, hundreds of soldiers and mechs preparing to surge forward and finish them. 15 seconds. Gabe, she called. Gabe, are you there? Just static. He was already gone, she realized. Already distributed across too many systems, stretched too thin. The EMP would just finish what time and entropy had started. 10 seconds. The lights in the village flickered, dimmed. Power was draining from everything, feeding into the reactor, building toward critical mass. 5 seconds. Tiana dropped to one knee, pressed her forehead against the stone wall, clutched the power cell so hard it hurt. 3, 2, 1. The world exploded in light. Not heat, not flame. Just pure, brilliant white light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. A light that erased shadows and burned itself into retinas, even through closed eyelids. The light lasted forever. The light lasted an instant. Time became meaningless in that moment of perfect brightness. Then darkness. Absolute. Every system dead. Every light extinguished. Every electronic device fried into uselessness. Silence. The mechanical sounds of war had stopped. No more engine roars. No more targeting sensors. No more communication chatter. Just breathing, groaning, the soft sounds of organic life in the dark. Tiana opened her eyes. The world resolved slowly from black to dark gray. Emergency chemical lights were starting to glow, activated by heat and impact rather than electricity. In their green-yellow light, she could see the battlefield. The enemy mechs stood frozen, locked in position like statues. Their optical sensors were dark, their weapons dead. Just metal shells now, no more dangerous than sculptures. The soldiers were in chaos. Their powered armor had shut down. Their targeting systems were gone. They stumbled in the darkness, calling to each other, trying to regroup without communication networks. "Open fire," Tiana ordered. Her warriors rose from cover, weapons hot, and descended on the enemy like a storm. Old-fashioned kinetic weapons that didn't need electronics. Blades that needed only arms to swing them. Rage that needed no power source but the heart. The battle became a slaughter. The enemy couldn't coordinate, couldn't retreat, couldn't do anything but die in the darkness while the defenders cut them down with methodical efficiency. Tiana watched it happen, numb. They were winning. Gabe's sacrifice had worked. The EMP had crippled the enemy beyond recovery. By morning, they would own the battlefield. But all she could feel was the weight of the now dark power cell in her hand. "Gabe," she whispered one more time. Silence. He was gone. Dawn came slowly, painting the battlefield in shades of red and gold. The enemy was broken, their survivors fleeing into the waste without communications or support. Victory, complete and absolute. Tiana stood in the village square, surrounded by the dead. So many dead. Blue-skinned warriors who'd fought with everything they had, and scattered among them, enemy soldiers who died in the dark, their technology stripped away, reduced to being merely mortal. The cairn stood silent in the center of the square. Gabe's grave, his symbol, his lie. Except now it wasn't a lie anymore. Elder Kale approached, his face haggard. He'd fought too, she noticed. Blood on his armor. The smugness was gone from his expression. "The casualties?" she asked. 43%. But we held. The enemy is routed. The civilians are safe. 43%. 3,000 dead. 3,000 futures ended. 3,000 families destroyed. The price of victory tasted like ash. "The human," Cal said quietly. Did you really?" "He saved us," Tiana said flatly. "Again. He existed as a digital consciousness for 2 days and spent every second of that time preparing to sacrifice himself one more time, to protect people who danced on his grave and celebrated his weakness." Cal looked at the cairn, at the twisted piece of mech armor crowning it. "We owe him more than we can ever repay." "Yes." Silence between them. The sound of medics moving through the square, checking bodies, separating the living from the dead. The sound of victory that felt like defeat. "What will you tell them?" Kyle asked. "The people?" Tiana looked at the power cell in her hand. Dark now, empty. Just a piece of metal and ceramic, no longer an anchor for an impossible consciousness. "The truth," she said, "that the last man died protecting us, that his sacrifice meant everything, that we survived because he was willing to give everything, twice for people who never fully appreciated him." She walked to the cairn, knelt before it, placed the power cell gently among the stones. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I didn't value you when you were here. I'm sorry we danced on your grave." The stone was cold beneath her knees. The morning light was cruel and bright, revealing every detail of the carnage around her. But she stayed there, kneeling, until the sun was fully risen. 3 days later, Tiana stood in the reactor chamber one final time. Engineers were working to restore power, but it would be weeks before the systems were fully operational again. The EMP had been thorough. She'd come back, she told herself, to check on their progress, to ensure the repairs were proceeding properly, to do her duty as commander. But really, she was looking for ghosts. "Gabe," she called quietly, knowing it was futile. "I know you're not there. I know you're gone. But I needed to say..." Her voice broke. She pressed her hands against the control console where she'd activated the overload, where she'd killed him for the second and final time. "You were right," she said to the empty air, "about the backup systems, about being careful, about everything. And I was wrong. Wrong to dismiss you. Wrong to think strength was only about fighting. You were the strongest person I ever met, and I never told you that. The reactor hummed quietly, restored to minimal function. Just a machine now. No consciousness hiding in its circuits. No ghost in the machine. She turned to leave, and stopped. On the main display screen, something flickered. Just for a second, a pattern of light that almost looked like words. Backup system activated. Tiana's heart stopped. Gabe! The lights flickered again, weaker, fainter, like something struggling to exist on the edge of oblivion. Not much left. The words formed slowly, each letter a struggle. Most of me gone. You're alive. She lunged forward, hands pressing against the screen as if she could reach through and grab him. How? The EMP should have destroyed everything. Back up. In. Back up. A pause. The screen flickered, almost went dark. Told you nothing. Perfect. She laughed and sobbed simultaneously. You brilliant, paranoid, wonderful idiot. You put a backup in the backup? Just fragment? Not really me. Just echo. I don't care. You're here. She stopped, realizing what he was saying. You can't hold on, can you? No. Power. System. Fried. Only. Few minutes. The screen brightened slightly. Wanted to say goodbye. No. The word came out fierce. No goodbyes. We'll restore power. We'll rebuild the systems. We'll... Tiana. Her name appeared with something like fondness in the stuttering letters. Let me go. I'm tired. She pressed her forehead against the screen, felt the faint warmth of failing electronics. I don't want to. I know, but you have to command them, rebuild, make it better. I can't do it without you. Yes, you can. A longer pause. Power failing. The end coming. You were always strong. Enough. Just needed to see it. Gabe. Thank you for carrying me. The letters faded. Brightened one last time. Thank you for being my friend. You were mine too. My friend. My partner. My... The words caught in her throat, but the screen was dark. Empty. Just glass and dead pixels. She stood there for a long time, one hand pressed against the screen, feeling the warmth fade as the circuits finally died. Then she straightened, wiped her eyes, took a breath. I'll make it better, she promised the empty room. I'll make sure your sacrifice meant something. I'll try to be worthy of what you gave us. Silence answered her, but it felt like the right kind of silence, like a benediction, like peace. She walked out of the reactor chamber with her back straight and her head high, every inch the commander her people needed her to be. 1 week later, the village square was full again, but this time there was no dancing, no celebration of mankind's end. Tiana stood before the cairn, which they'd rebuilt larger, more permanent. The twisted piece of mech armor still crowned it, but now there were other things too. Tools, circuit boards, a melted piece of door frame that someone had salvaged from the original command post. The entire village stood silent, waiting. We gather to honor Gabe, Tiana said, her voice carrying across the crowd. A human, a technician, a man we didn't value enough when he was alive. She looked at the faces watching her, young and old, warriors and civilians, all of them alive because of choices made by a fragile human who'd refused to be fragile when it mattered. He died twice for us. The first time, he shielded us from plasma fire. The second time, he sacrificed his consciousness, his very existence, to save us from an enemy we couldn't defeat. And both times, he did it willingly, without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. She pulled something from her pocket. The backup power cell, still dark, still empty, but precious, sacred. Before he died, he told me that nothing is perfect. Not his technology, not our armor, not us. And he was right. We are all flawed, all fragile in our own ways. But that doesn't make us weak. Sometimes our flaws are where we find our strength. She placed the power cell on the cairn, next to the other offerings. Gabe taught me that heroism isn't about being the strongest or the fastest or the most advanced. It's about choosing to act when action matters. It's about sacrifice. It's about caring enough to risk everything for people who might not even appreciate it. She looked at Elder Cal, standing in the front row. We danced on his grave once. We celebrated the end of mankind. We were wrong, and we're sorry. Cal nodded slowly. It wasn't forgiveness. She wasn't asking for that. Just acknowledgement. Just the truth. From this day forward, Tiana continued, we honor him not as a symbol of our superiority, but as an equal, as a hero, as someone who showed us what courage really means. She stepped back from the cairn. The crowd stood in respectful silence for a long moment. Then one by one, warriors began to come forward. Each one placed something at the cairn's base. Weapons, armor pieces, personal items, gifts for the dead who'd saved them. Tiana watched until every warrior had paid their respects. Then she turned and walked toward the command center, where reports waited and decisions needed to be made, and the weight of leadership pressed down like always. But it felt different now. Lighter somehow, despite the loss, because she wasn't carrying it alone. She was carrying forward the lessons he'd taught her, the strength he'd shown her, the courage he'd given freely. They buried his body, she said quietly to herself, repeating the words that had ended the original fight. They should have checked where he uploaded his mind. Except now there was no mind left. No ghost, no backup of a backup. Just memory, just legacy, just the knowledge that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who matter most. She entered the command center and got to work. There was a village to rebuild, defenses to restore, a future to build. And she would build it in a way that honored what he taught her, with humility, with gratitude, with the understanding that strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the fragile ones are the strongest of all. The door closed behind her. The square emptied. The cairn stood silent under the alien sun, crowned with twisted metal and surrounded by tokens of respect earned twice over. And somewhere in the digital shadows, or perhaps nowhere at all, an echo of consciousness finally let go and drifted into whatever peace awaited ghosts who'd fought too hard and loved too fiercely and given everything they had.